Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you all had a great weekend. It's been cool, but I must say I had a good time having a little bit of a swim in a sauna over the weekend. Macro thoughts, James G. Rickards. Did a lot of suckers get taken for a ride in Bitcoin? And he concludes, sure. But the bigger story is how the entire bubble was a fraud that used Tether to manipulate Bitcoin prices. Here's the evidence in a 66-page academic study with data and flowcharts. Bitcoin was last trading at 6,310. It bounced Friday night, Saturday, from around 5,800. Have a look at that 66-page study that was from the Department of Finance, the University of Texas at Austin, and of course I wrote about it in November 2017 when I said Bitcoin, wow, what a ride, and I was telling everyone to take profits because it had turned parabolic. And then in January 2018, when I said I'm no longer bullish Bitcoin, in fact I'm bearish, and we've seen a significant drawdown since then. This was a painful first half of the year for many asset classes. This is a good infographic from JS Blockland. Merkel's slowdown rocks the euro common currency, jumps after German Interior Minister Seehofer offers to resign, but resumes retreat after Seehofer sets another ultimatum. Last trading at 116.54. Home thoughts, I watched the highlights of the match between France and Argentina, and certainly this fellow Kylian Mbappe has arrived on the world stage, and I thought to myself, the few world stages that can match the FIFA World Cup when you consider how many people are watching. The highlights of that match are linked on Rich Wrap-Ups as well. And this is a photograph from AFP of him celebrating after scoring the fourth goal. I couldn't resist this photograph, Messi versus the world, from Getty Images. Charlie Mayhew, who's one of the founders of the Safaricom Marathon up in Lower, tweeted runners and spectators driving into Lower at dawn. That was on Saturday for today's 19th annual Safaricom Marathon. It's really a tremendous event. Word of the day, thalassophile, a lover of the sea, someone who is powerfully drawn to and by the ocean, from the ancient Greek thalassa, sea, and philos, dear beloved. I find myself in that category. Prancing in the Sky, a photo by Daniel Fawcett. And then a photograph from J. Wade Smith, a pause from science to reflect on the beauty Africa offers. We all need to protect this gift to us. Political reflections, amazing scenes now. President-elect AMLO in the front seat of a car without security, followed by crowds of reporters. The Mexican peso pared some of its early gains, however, but still kept a solid lead over all the other major currencies. It's an interesting change of direction. Be worth seeing how it plays out, because I listened to what he was saying this morning on the occasion of his victory, and it seemed as if he was invested of the need to change things. The question is, it's quite a long shot to change it, I think. The collapse of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Rudy Giuliani said, is around the corner. He gave his speech, of course, at an MEK event. MEK is Israeli-backed and Marxist Islamist, and a bit of a cult. And then China Han says US is now pushing zero tolerance, i.e. no waivers on cessation of Iran oil purchases by EU, ROK, Japan, India, China, it's showtime for Iran regime change. China only holdout signal for Trump. He wants Iran crushed in the next few months. It's showtime for Iran regime change. So they're really trying to step up the pressure. You see it on social media as well. I'm not so convinced that Iran, has seen this kind of thing off since 1979. Democrats badly underestimate Trump. The last 2 weeks have been another loud wake-up call for Democrats who have railed against President Trump, but who thought that this reality star commander-in-chief was so incompetent, corrupt, and self-centered that it was only a matter of time before he went away. In their view, the president, who surrounded himself with third-rate advisors and who had no legislative skills to speak of, would be hampered in how much damage he could inflict before his term ended. It's looking very different now. The minute that Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy announced he was retiring, every Democrat who has been paying attention to the court realized the implications. With the evangelical right cheering him on, President Trump now has the opportunity to push through a giddy Republican Senate, a judicial nominee who will dramatically swing the majority of the Supreme Court much further to the right. Although he was pressured into backing down from his draconian policy of separating children from their parents at the border, Trump sent his message loud and clear. He is willing to go as far as he thinks is necessary to fight for stringent border policies. He is willing to inflict psychological damage on kids and subject border crossers to the toughest security measures possible until he convinces Congress to build the physical wall that he has been promising. Trump is also demonstrating that the power of the president to tear things down is immense, especially if that president is not particularly interested in putting something different in its place. Interestingly enough, the real estate developer president has not turned out to be much of a builder. He prefers to take things apart and then walk away from the rubble without looking back. And I think that's correct, and I think everyone has underestimated him. And a lot depends on where Mueller goes, because there is a case in plain sight there. But this is a political arena. RT Underground, that's Afshin Rattansi, interviewed Seymour Hersh, who I must say is a very clear voice in a world of considerable interference in the matters that he chooses to opine on. I was reading the FT, and in it I saw this, and this is about Najib Razak taking to Facebook as his way of communicating, and having previously wanted to introduce some quite draconian fake news laws, and I said, it's the irony, and you need to be careful about what you wish for. Prime Minister must deliver hard Brexit or face revolt, says Rees-Mogg. It's a very difficult place, and I came across these tweets. Brexit is like being told that actually you don't have a terminal illness after all, but you've already booked the tickets to Dignitas and you don't want to make a fuss. Merkel's Interior Minister Horst Seehofer offers to resign, issues German Chancellor with another ultimatum on immigration in a blow to German coalition. The euro is seemingly trading on that headline news, currently 116.42. Let's have a look at the currency markets. 116.42 euro dollar, dollar index 94.74, Japanese yen 110.68, Swiss franc 0.9927, the pound 131.67, the Australian dollar 0.7372, so the dollar strengthened this morning overall. India rupee 68.645, South Korean won 1119.26, the real, that's softening 3.8771, Egyptian pound, they took the devaluation on a long time ago, 17.8867. and the South African rand at 13.7925. 1440 was an area where massive buying came in severally under Jacob Zuma. It'll be interesting to see whether that area holds this time round. Dollar index, this is a 3-month chart. I think we've strengthened a little bit this morning, but in a kind of no man's land at the moment. I'd like to see further developments. I think it's still unfolding. Euro dollar 116.40 now. This is a chart from T Commodity. This caught my attention in the morning. Since the turn of the century, total newspaper circulation has fallen by almost 40%. That must be obviously print. Commodity index, this is via economics. It was a tough month last month for this index. Oil prices closed the highest since December 2014 over the weekend. But we've come off a little bit, we've come off just under 1% now. And this is off the back of a tweet that President Trump put out. He said, just spoke to King Salman of Saudi Arabia. I'm asking that Saudi Arabia increase oil production maybe up to 2 million barrels to make up the difference. Price is too high. He has agreed. And then Jonathan Ferro says, so did he agree prices are too high, or did he agree to boost production? 2 million barrels per day, big difference for markets come on Monday morning. Down just under 1%, it's highly, the market's quite skeptical, I think. And this is a chart of WTI crude oil from T Commodity. Has not happened, may not happen, but a decisive close below 12.38 could lead to a retest of 2015 low at 10.45. This is Peter Brand looking at the price of gold, which is at 12.4875. But it seems to him 12.38 is key. BBG Industrial Metals Index still holding above Ichimoku. Bears should be careful. T Commodity again. The Russian ruble suffered its worst performance in the first half of 2018 among its 11 ex-Soviet peers for the first time in half a decade. After the toll taken by sanctions, the currency is down more than 8% against the dollar in 2018, more than double the loss of any currency in the group. Sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa has signed the agreement for the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. That's big news indeed. Now we just need Nigeria to sign up for it. My weekend piece was Ethiopia Rising. Abiy Ahmed Ali, born in August 1976, was appointed the 12th Prime Minister of Ethiopia on the 2nd of April 2018. He grew up in a Muslim family, Ahmed Ali, his Oromo father, Tizeta Walde, his mother, and with Oromo Muslim and Christian grandparents. He is evidently a Virillian and Gladwellian figure. To create one contagious movement, you often have to create many small movements first. Malcolm Gladwell. Look at the world around you. It may seem like an immovable, implacable place. It is not. With the slightest push in just the right place, it can be tipped. He has been Prime Minister for 90 days. During those 90 days, he has crisscrossed the country. He has ended a state of emergency, released thousands of political prisoners, thawed relations with Eritrea, bagged $1 billion from the UAE's NBZ, announced a dramatic economic about-turn, and that's not the end of it. In matters language and linguistics, he has tapped into a Nelson Mandela 1994 mood. These 90 or so days represent the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison, blinking in the sunlight, and constructed his rainbow nation. I was watching the France-Argentina game and the arrival of Kylian Mbappe on the world stage at the tender age of 19. I recalled watching the whirling dervishes of the Mevlevi order on a night of a full moon in Konya, Turkey. I thought to myself, what do they all have in common with Abiy Ahmed? It's all about speed and velocity. Paul Virilio terms it dromology, which he defined as the science or logic of speed. He notes that the speed at which something happens may change its essential nature, and that which moves with speed quickly comes to dominate that which is slower. Whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost a matter of movement and circulation. Virilio argues that the traditional feudal fortified city disappeared because of the increasing sophistication of weapons and possibilities for warfare. For Virilio, the concept of siege warfare became rather a war of movement. Abiy Ahmed has moved at lightning speed. The old guard is like the traditional feudal fortified city. He said on the 19th of June the people of Tigray are still begging for a drop of water. TPLF, the party, is not the people of Tigray. Very powerful statement there. On the same day, he said, we are in debt, we have to pay back, but we can't. And secondarily, we aren't able to finish projects we have started. And announced his economic pivot. Of course, the downside risk of all this infrastructure is plain to see. And Sri Lanka and the tale of its Hambantota port is now a cautionary tale. FX reserves were less than a month's worth of imports, and something needed to be done. Expectations are high. The Prime Minister needs to execute real quick on the economic front, but if he levels the playing field, a whole troop of folks will be looking to pile in. That troop will include the Ethiopian diaspora, foreign investors, and I'm sure our very own Safaricom, who must have already presented the Prime Minister with a copy of the MIT research on M-Pesa, which confirmed access to mobile money services increased daily per capita consumption levels of 2% of Kenyan households, lifting them out of extreme poverty. Abiy Ahmed's first 90 days have been as remarkable as the less than 90 minutes of France's Mbappe's performance on Saturday. John Aglionby has written about how Eritrea replies to Ethiopia's olive branch with envoys to Addis, talking about this group that included Osman Saleh, Eritrea's foreign minister, Yemane Gebre, one of President Isaiah Afewerki's closest advisors. Neighbors have been in a state of no war, no peace since the end of a 2-year war in 2000. But Abiy said this, our desire is to love rather than hate, at a state dinner he hosted during the envoy's visit. What we miss is to hug our brothers in Asmara. If we are in love, then the other things are minor. And if we do that, we might not need a border. He also promised to resume Ethiopian airline flights from Addis to Asmara, Eritrea's capital, after a 20-year hiatus. Mr. Osman responded equally effusively, today is a day of joy because two identical peoples and two generations have been separated throughout that period, he said. But through struggles we have opened the door of peace. Rashid Abdi said Mr. Abiy's decision to open up Ethiopia's authoritarian system of government could well be resonating with the Eritrean dictator. If you see the rise of a dynamic young leader changing the region, that sends jitters through a regime like the one in Asmara. The impact of Abiy's positive reforms could have repercussions for ISIS. And Eritrea is not a country that has a reputation for making quick deals. They're very cautious. But Mr. Hallelujah said the Ethiopian Prime Minister was likely to leverage Abiy mania, the mass popular support he has generated for his reform program, to his advantage. And then another article from Andrew Koribiko, the assassination attempt against Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy. Talking about the grenade that went off, so as not to be misunderstood, all of the aforementioned is purely circumstantial, and considering Abiy's policies challenge the entrenched interests of the TPLF, it's natural to wonder whether a few of its most radical affiliates might have gone rogue and wanted to send him a message, just like the institutional enemies of his fellow socio-political revolutionary, Saudi Crown Prince bin Salman. I don't know if bin Salman is a socio-political revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination. A beautiful sunrise over the Luangwa River in Zambia. This is Will BL. Putting on the brakes, the government is taking steps to curb the ballooning debt, but will that be enough to make an IMF program possible? This is Africa Confidential asking about Zambia, which I think is really in the soup. Proportion of women between 20 and 24 years of age who are married by the age of 18. This is from ECA Official. Dollar versus Rand. This is a 6-month chart. As you can see, the Rand is at lows we haven't seen since Ramaphosa came in. The Egyptian pound hanging in there largely because they took the devaluation some time ago. Moving to Kenya, Kenyan economy grows most since 2016 as good weather boosts crops. Kenya's economy expanded at an annualized rate of 5.7% in the first quarter of this year, compared to 4.8% in the same period of last year. The agricultural sector expanded by 5.2% compared to 1% in the same period last year. And what I've always said, you need to be a meteorologist if you want to be an economist in Africa, because the rains has such a significant and consequential impact on well-being and on GDP. Grand corruption throughout society is being exposed on a scale Kenyans have never seen before, all apparently with the full support of President Kenyatta. A scale of the graph problem that regardless of ethnic or party affiliation, the country is in uproar about it. Nevertheless, many believe that as in the past, there will be no punishment of the guilty, even if showcase arrests and trials of the guilty take place. And that's really the issue. Will there be something that will come out of this or not? For those wondering what Sugar Daddy Rye is all about, one man imported enough sugar to give all Kenyans 5 kilograms of sugar each. Kenya Eurobond yields, 10 and 30-year issues, yields tracking up higher. Kenya shilling is appreciated against the dollar by 2.1% in the first half of this year. I think the main issue of support has been inward remittances, which have increased 56.6% since a year ago. Kenyans will from Monday start paying more for mobile money transfers, chocolates, kerosene and bottled water. I think this was a seriously suboptimal budget and that we should have been cutting taxes and casting the tax net wider. Kenya shilling is at 100.843. Yields on treasury bills declined by 40 basis points, 90 basis points, and 70 basis points to 7.7%, 9.7% and 10.5%. This is in Kenya. The stock market, of course, was very bullish until April, and then we've sold off by about 10% or a little bit more since then. Once again, thank you for stopping by.